Hello and welcome back to yet again another EDH deck design video. Today I'm going to show another Vela the Night-Clad deck. This, although unlike my foily shiny Vela deck, this is more of a budget deck. I had done this earlier with the optimizations where I got some of a set, like the Bassandra that is Commander 2011 only, for example. This deck is constructed from cards just from the Planechase sets, both the original and the new one. When I first put this together, it was very weak, far weaker than even my Urbrass deck is. So in this particular deck, just to make it functional in my current play group, I cheated a little bit, and you'll see what I mean by that. But currently, technically, every single card in this deck is from one of the Planechase sets. When building this deck, there's just a lot of ways I could have actually taken this. There's a lot of cards in these two colors in Planechase, actually. We've gone through two completely different cycles now. There's a lot of zombies, there's ninjas, artifacts, and affinity tech, modular. Like, there's just a lot of things you could have actually put in here. So what I ended up doing is trying to put literally the best, like when it comes to pure value cards in the deck. And then that ended up being a pseudo ninja deck. So that's kind of what we have here, a little unblockable ninja techie deck. If you're unfamiliar with Vela, if you haven't seen my other video, what Vela is, she is a 6 mana for a blue and a black. For a 4/4 Intimidate. Intimidate is a creature cannot be blocked except by artifacts or creatures that match its colors, like a blue or black creature. She also gives all my other creatures Intimidate. And the fun thing on her is when a creature leaves the battlefield, on my side, all of my opponents lose 1 life. So let's keep her over here, and let's go ahead and get through the creature package here. Again, there's lots and lots of creatures to pick from this set. I'll show you what I'm currently running and what could be in here. So for the creatures, it starts off with lots of small little doofusy guys, little guys that just early beaters, something to get something off. Essentially as an unblockable tech, because as you'd expect, there are ninjas in here. Festering Golem is a little guy that usually doesn't want to get blocked if someone has another utility creature out. Tormented Soul is a straight up unblockable. This guy is unblockable, but he lets me also tutor for something that costs 2. There's actually a few pretty good tutors in the deck, or cards that cost 2 in the deck that he's actually worthwhile, but a 1/3 unblockable that early is also very good. Baleful Strix is one of the good cards in the deck. This deck is actually exceptionally cheap to build. Even with the little cheaty things I did here, you'll see shortly, but by just the cards, there are only 4 cards that actually cost about $10. Then there's like maybe a handful that cost $5, and everything else is just dirt cheap. This is one of the actually expensive cards. I think right now he's about $5. But he's all around one of the better cards. I even put this in some of my other decks. Like, it's just 2 mana for 1/1 Flying Death Touch. When he enters, he draws a card. Augury Owl is another little flyer this early game lets us scry. Withered Witch is just Wretch is just wonderful for graveyard hate. And lastly, we have the Ink Fathom Witch, which is another fear creature, and he has a chance of doing a small pump. That doesn't happen too often, though. We have 2 little mana accelerants. There's not a whole bunch of ramp in the deck. There's these 2 and 1 artifact you'll see. They also tend to be little guys that may just become unblockable, though. Then we have some techie cards, some little goofy cards that may help us survive the game to actually go through it. The Wizard Replica is fantastic because a lot of people forget that you just don't see this a lot in EDH. So an active counter spell that's just sitting there in a creature, it's kind of funny. Cadaver Imp helps us recur a little bit. Wall of Frost helps us to deflect attackers. Specters, this is really fun to bounce back to your hand if given a chance, because this is really good card advantage because you're making all opponents discard 1. This is another really good deflector. Just makes people not want to attack you. This is another little bit of recursion, just getting a creature back. And this isn't really that great of a card in the deck. It's just a small pump to all of our creatures. But this technically does make Vela, I guess, a 6/6. There's really not a whole bunch of exceptional creatures, so the fact that we're running this liege, flying is great, but compared to all the other lieges, it could be better. Then we have the ninjas. This one lets us peek at someone's hand, or I'm sorry, return target creature to their hand. This one lets us basically mind rot someone. This one lets us destroy non-black to Doomblade someone. This one is actually one of the better ones because it lets us return a ninja to our hand so we can repeat and enter the battlefield effect or something with them. But also when she connects, I can look at someone's hand. Hideguru is fantastic because he actually allows me to go tutor up another one. and he also gives a ninja unblockable. This one is essentially a scroll thief, just lets me connect, draw a card. Skull Snatcher is a little bit more graveyard hate. It's probably one of the worst ninjas in here. Here's another one of the actually worthwhile cards to play. This one's actually one of the $10 cards. It's essentially a possible 2-mana clone, or a standalone clone. Ink Eyes is one of the more well-known clones. It helps us get stuff out of the graveyard. Her regenerate is also fantastic. And the last ninja is the Demon Ninja. This is again one of the $10 cards. For some reason, he's only printed once. And I really wish he was legendary, because this would be like the flavor on this. A Demon Ninja is just fantastic. What he does when he connects, he's got like the Rexel effect. Not Rexel. The effect where I can just play something from someone's hand. The whatever that other blue-black creature is that when he connects. But he's also one of our bigger creatures. And we're actually running out of creatures. There's not a lot of beats in this deck. So we only have 3 really big creatures here. The Ascendant, he has a chance to kill some of our little techie dudes, but makes a lot of other things bigger. Helldozer is also another gimmicky card. He's just really slow, and being a 2-color deck makes it kind of hard to get him off more than once if he even survives to untap. And the last creature is actually more of an amusing card, really not that strong, but when paired with Vala, I can very slowly pay 2 mana and drain everyone for 1. I guess that's could be considered a combo if I had infinite mana, but I do not have infinite mana in the deck, so this guy he's kind of there just for shits and giggles. That's the creature package. Going on to spells, you will now understand why I'm cheating. I am actually using a full complement. I think there's about 17 textless cards in this deck, because there are no set symbols. Technically, I have a stack of cards that these used to be. Now I'll get to the stack shortly, but this is what the deck's currently running. Without the textless cards, the power level of the deck just was absurdly low. Even in some of my newer play groups, it was just getting destroyed. So I had to put better cards in the deck, and I had to kind of cheat. So we have about 5 counter spells here. We got the Mana Leak, the Negate, the Remove Soul, Hinder is actually the goodie, and of course Cancel. Cancel is actually in the Commander set. That is the only counter spell that was, or not Commander, the Planechase set. It's the only counter spell in the entire Planechase set, other than that Wizard replica thing. But I mean, the full art one matches the rest of the full art, so it's in here. We have some removal. Psionic Blast is fantastic. If you're not familiar with these I should probably go ahead and say. Mana Leak is counter unless you pay 3. Negates counter non-creature. Remove Souls counter creature. Hinder counters and Puzzly on the bottom. Cancels a straight counter. Psionic Blast is an instant that I can burn a creature or a player for 4 and myself for 2. It's a plane shifted char. Doom Blade is destroy target non-black, as is Tear. One of these also hits I think this one hits non-artifact. I can't remember. Nameless Inversion is a little odd. It's usually seen as a combo with whatever that guy is that lets you play soldiers from your graveyard, but it's an instant, lets me give target creature +3 and -3, and it loses all of its creature types. Basically another removal. Cruel Edict is not really that good of a card. I mean, it's decent. But I mean, for 2 mana, target player sacks 1 creature at sorcery speed. It could be better. I don't know if you can see, but this also is just massively damaged. This one, I found it in the back of my drawer where I thought I had a stack of these I was going to make a 60-card textless deck with, and this one got kind of banged up. And finally, we have Infest, which is all creatures get -2, -2. Well, not finally, I suppose, because there's Corrupt. This is a bad card. It really shouldn't be in a 2-color deck, especially when I don't have a way of making everything I have a swamp. It's a sorcerer speed. Target creature player loses X life, or does X damage to the creature, and I gain that much life per the number of swamps I have. Then we have some drawing tech. Blue has lots of draw. So we got the Ponder. This is sorcerer speed. Look at the top 3 cards in my deck. I could rearrange them, and put them on back, and I may shuffle my deck, and then I draw a card. Then there's Concentrate. Tidings, which is sorcerer speed, draw 4. Sign of Blood, sorcerer speed. I lose 2, or target player loses 2 life, draws 2 cards. Treasure Hunt is also another situational card. It's really not that good unless you have a way of filtering and putting a lot of lands on top of your deck. Because it literally just says reveal the top card of your deck and draw it until you hit a land card. So yeah, it's decent. And then Siphon Mines, each player discards and I draw, so in multiplayer it's decent, but again, in 1v1 this is not something you should ever play. Then we actually have a pretty good, decent amount of extra techie cards. Fabricate, there's about 4 good artifacts in the deck that I really want, that really work well with Vala, actually. So Fabricate lets us go tutor. And we also have another tutor. I normally don't like tutors that show my opponent what I'm drawing, but again, I'm playing within restriction here. Zombify is another really cool card. It just lets me pull a creature from my graveyard to play. But we also have the Beacon, which lets me get it from another player's graveyard or also an artifact. And then finally we have a command, which is actually one of our probably better win conditions because it's an X spell, and I can drain one opponent. Let's go to the non-spells, or the permanents, I suppose. We have 3 enchantments. Here's another one of the actual good cards. It's Phyrexian Arena, something you'd expect to see in a normal EDH deck. This is one of the $10 cards. Here's the other $10 card. This is the last expensive card of the deck. It is Grave Pact. There's not a lot I can really do with Grave Pact. I don't have a lot of sack outlets, but I mean it's good enough to put in the deck because it's better than a lot of the cards in the deck. And the final enchantment is Sunken Hope. With Vela, that's kind of nifty triggers, especially with the ninjas where I can get multiple triggers. Really good with that Liliana Spectre, of course. This is actually a really underplayed card in a lot of control decks. Like, I know the 5 mana really sucks, and there's a lot better cards you can play that do the same thing, but this effect is actually really good in EDH. A friend was playing his Nekasar deck, and he landed the Tefari's Puzzle Box, and they didn't recognize that this was on the table, and all of a sudden generals were just kind of going away, so it was kind of fun. Then we'll go on to the artifacts. This is our only other ramp in the deck past the mirror, and it's always fun to just randomly roll a dice for no reason in EDH. Then, of course, we have some good stuff for EDH. Relic is actually commonly seen. Armillary Sphere is good advantage against some basics. Farsight Mask is our last draw tech spell, or artifact. This one can also be really entertaining against different cards, like if someone plays a Spiteful Visions or something silly like that. And then we have some equipment. We have a Warhammer. This is something I like to tutor up. And then we have a Quiet as Spike, which is really good on those early unblockable guys. And finally, the Whisper Silk Cloak, which actually lets us usually go through. And finally, we're to the lands. There's not a lot of good lands to pick from. There was, I believe, only one blue-black deck to pick from, but there's a few other that had a multicolor, like there was the Maelstrom Wonder Rainbow deck, for example. But we have a few non-basics. We have a tap land, a bounce land. I really don't like these because you're just waiting to get strip mined. But I mean, it's in here just to be in here. One of the actual good ones that doesn't come into play tapped, comes into play tapped, and comes into play tapped, and comes into play tapped, and comes. God damn it! Yeah, I really don't like tap lands, especially in a 2-color deck, because they're not really necessary. In this deck, I decided to put them in because, as you saw, I have some things that are 2 or 3 mana requirements, and I want those out early game. Like a Grave Pact would be really good to have out as early as possible if I'm playing a lot of tiny guys. And then the rest of these are just these basic lands. I chose this artwork for the island. And I chose that artwork for the swamp. I actually like this artwork a lot. I love the Urza cycle lands from Urza Saga, and that swamp's in there, and I've always enjoyed that one. But that is the current deck that I'm running. These are the cards that were in there before I decided to go with the textless cards. And as you can see, like, compared these to some of the textless cards, they're just really, really subpar. Rotting Rats is great if I want to recur things from my graveyard, but I don't have a consistent way of recurring. And I'm not playing zombies, so I decided to take him out because he hits us too. If he hit target opponent, if this was like the whatever that rat is that enters and targets, and yeah, there's not enough artifacts in here for this to be consistent. And my opponents, it's really variable against opponents. So 4 for a possible 1/1 that does nothing is really not going to be consistently good. There is Cascade card because of that Maelstrom Wanderer deck. The precon is fantastic, but in this deck I have a lot of counter spells and spells I might not want to cast, like removal, so I took the Cascade guy out. Primal Plasm is a vanilla blah. He's usually going to be some kind of flyer just for the evasion, but in the end game there's just better stuff. The Drake is normally really, really powerful in the right deck. In this deck, when I took this out, like, he could still technically be in there for a flyer and untap for counter magic, but I don't have a lot of counters in the deck, so I mean he doesn't really fit anymore. He never really fit in the first place. Dark Hatchling is also really good. I like removal on a stick, but at 6 mana and without an evoke cost, it's just not that good. Seeing Beyond, I think this one was taken out for the Sign in Blood. It's just another draw tech. I'd rather keep the 2 cards instead of shuffling one in. There's the cancel. Assassinate, I mean, you saw all the removal. Assassinate's a situational sorcery speed one. There's another Cascade that's just a bounce. Another draw that's been replaced, I think. The Tidings replaced this one. Dark Ritual doesn't really do anything. Well, I mean, it's a really good card, but in this deck I'm not going to have a very big early game. This is another situational sorcery speed removal, and I have a lot of creatures that I want to keep out. So if I ever get to the point where I have to put the counters on my own creatures, that kind of sucks. Innocent Blood is a really good removal itself, but the fact that I want to flood the early game with tiny creatures to get some unblockable thing, it's not going to be that good. I like trap cards, but the mana cost, if it never triggers, is really high for what it does. And here's another situational removal. Again, it's not black. I might as well play the 2 mana costing one instead. And the last one is an artifact. It's like a filter whenever a creature lands. There's better things I'd rather be doing than equipping this and filtering cards, because I could just draw them instead with the other cards. But that is the current Vela deck. This is my budget Vela the Night-Clad deck. On a scale of 1 to 10, this power level is approximately 5, so it's right in the middle. I would say this is better than Cassandra and Urbrask. Without the full art cards, this was far, far weaker than those, probably on a scale, probably down around like 2. But as is, this is a funny deck. It's not like Cassandra where it's packed full of answers. It has some answers, but the goal of the deck, the way this deck wins, is by sustaining itself and draining people very slowly. Maybe not even with her, just by small attacks and putting up good defense for other attackers. But for the power level of decks this usually plays against, that works out well. Obviously, if I'm playing against a stronger group, I'm not going to play this. I'll just go get the actual good Vela deck, I suppose. I mean, that deck actually has really good ways of busting Vela with like Rites of Replication on her, or the Thopter Assembly, where every turn I can drain someone for about 6. But that's a combo control deck, and this is just like a little shenanigan deck. But I really like Vela. I mean, I like these self-restricted decks because they're really good against specific playgroups, because there's a budget here, and there's a power level here that I can control. And if you enjoyed this in my Cassandra deck and my little Urbrask deck, then yeah, these budget decks they're pretty nifty. I always suggest to give them a try, especially if you have more than one playgroup or different levels of skill of playgroups or budget-wise playgroups, because these self-restricted decks are really a good challenge to play, even against other groups. If you're going to sit down with like a very large group of semi-competitive to competitive people and you're playing a budgety deck, it's kind of interesting to see how just far you can go before you get destroyed. But yeah, there's actually just so many different ways this particular build could have gone. For Planechase, there's actually quite a few legendaries you can do this with. Like obviously there's Ink Eyes. There's the green-white flying Archon thing. Then there's, of course, Maelstrom Wonder. You can make a really wicked Maelstrom Wonder deck because it's Maelstrom Wonder. Then there's just actually quite a few really good legendaries to pick from when choosing to do this particular build. But I like Vela, and I like blue and black, so I chose to go this one. But of course, any feedback, definitely let me know. Like there's all sorts of different cards. Of course, they haven't printed, I don't think, a textless card for a few years now. I think 2012 maybe. And I'm not really going to put the Damnation or Cryptic Command in here because, as you saw, the price of this deck is just incredibly efficient. Like, take out those 4 $10 cards, and I think the deck, well, I mean, the textless card's a little different there. But, I mean, without those 4 $10 cards, like, the deck is below $30. And that makes this just an incredibly efficient deck for the price in what you're investing in it. Granted, like, some other decks might have, like, one $100 card, and it just blows this deck away. But I mean, that's expected if you're spending money on your deck. So, yeah, I'm always open to feedback. If you have anything like this, always share, because I always like self-restricted decks. If you have a fun reason or any kind of theme to them, that's pretty clever. Thanks.